Thank you, everybody, for finding the time to come to this very important gathering this night. In 2019, the Sumo Private High School, where I taught, assigned me to organize a weekly literary event at which the students can read and discuss select works by Nigerian writers. A month into this serial extracurricular activity, I ran out of works for the students, so I decided to look up some writers whose work aligned with the theme of childhood. That was when I stumbled on Fisherman by Chigozie Obioma for the first time. Immediately, this story caught my attention, not only because it was so excellently written, but mainly because the experiences of the child characters resonated with my childhood. Everything else about the children mirrors my childhood except that I did not kill my brother. Nigeria has produced generations of great writers, from Chinua Achebe and Flora Nwapa to Wole Soyinka and Cyprian Ekwensi, to name a few. These writers have continued to shape literary conversations in Nigeria, following the clarion calls their writing made to socio-political development, national unity, nation building, and their role in preserving and transmitting the nation's cultural heritage. Their writing remains valid to date because Nigeria is still grappling with some of the national foibles questioned in their writing. Chigozie Obioma joined the trend in 2015 with Fisherman, a debut that took the literary world by storm. Since then, he has remained amongst the finest of the generation. One of the remarkable traits of Obioma's writing is its gentle and fairy tale style, a narrative fashion akin to that of the famous Chinua Achebe. In this strange story of the world, for example, Obioma begins with the following lines. The story of how my father became rich starts in 2002, shortly after Savannah Bank, where he worked for 20 years, closed down. Papa had gotten a job there as a junior clerk through the help of his uncle, even though all he had was a secondary school certificate. No wonder the New York Times has crowned Obioma as the heir to Chinua Achebe. Obioma's writing is as fascinating as it is entertaining, and expertise possible when a writer has sojourned personally in some of the worlds he builds for his characters. Woven around war, mythology, spirituality, class, family conflict, to name a few, his writing brings to the fore the complexities that warp life. It explores what it means to be human and brings its readers to terms with the realities embedded in a society ripped by tribal war, political violence, armed conflict, and decades-long socio-economic imbalances. These dynamics run across Fisherman and Orchestra of Minorities and the road to the country. A particularly important moment in Fisherman, for example, is when four brothers, taking advantage of their father's absence, go fishing in a forbidden river. There, they encounter a madman who prophesies to the eldest of the brothers that he is destined to be killed by one of his siblings. What follows this prophecy challenges the reader's imagination, reveals Obioma's exceptional narrative capacity, and is the reason Obioma has inscribed his names on the sands of time. The value of his work reflects also on the accolades he has won so far. Fisherman and an Orchestra of Minorities, for example, were finalists for the Booker Prize and have been translated into 30 languages. He has won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, the prestigious International Literature, the Oppenheimer Prize for Fiction, and the NAACP Image Award, and has twice been nominated for 24 prizes for fiction. He was named one of the Foreign Policy's 100 Leading Global Thinkers in 2015 and served as judge for the Booker Prize in 2021. In fact, his literary accolades are so many that if they are stacked up like cards, I am very sure they would reach the sky. His works have appeared in the New York Times, Esquire, Guardian, Financial Times, the Paris Review, Kenyon Review, Granter, and elsewhere. He is Helen S. Lanier Distinguished Professor of English and Creative Writing at the University of Georgia, Athens, as well as the program director of Oxbelly Fiction Retreats. Ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome one of the most celebrated writers of our time, Professor Chigozie Obioma.
Well, that was a bit too long and grandiose. I'm not any of those things, I have to assure you. See, I was just driving through with Paul, and I was wondering, this campus is so beautiful that, you know, but if I were to live here, I would be just looking around, you know, the whole day. I would just be walking around, you know, just soaking in the beauty. But despite being 1 hour late, everyone here waited for this man. Please, I appreciate your generosity. Thank you very much for waiting. Even though you have, how do I put this thing back? Okay, this one. It might not work. See, my voice is deep enough, so let me talk to you. So again, apologies. Sometimes technology fails us, you see. This is not how I wanted to dress better tonight, but we will make do with this. So thank you for the introduction. My friend, what's your name, sir?
I'm Samuel Ekana.
Okay, Samuel Ekana. Okay. So you were to have, I think, lunch with me tomorrow. Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here. One of my old students is here. As your professor. Who knows who that is? Xavier. But he's not here tonight. I think he hates me now. Once you become a professor, then you hate your professors. Okay, well, so I will talk very briefly about my work, and then I would read a little bit. So what is to say? Most of you here are writers, I suppose, and you understand that what we do is very difficult. You know, do you think it's easy, sir?
Hard.
It's very hard. Yeah. So we're in the same camp. So what I really try to do when I write fiction is two things. You know, I like to joke that I really write the same book again and again. But really I'm interested in two things. I'm interested first in what I might call the emotional evolution of people from one state to the other, usually extreme states. Yeah, I'm a man of extremities, or extremes, if you would put it that way. So I like to so, you know, let's imagine that I have a character in my mind who at the beginning of the novel is a very good man, you know, or a good boy. He loves his siblings. He would do anything for them. Then I think to myself, you know what, I want to orchestrate events whereby this man changes so much. He evolves, so to speak, and he becomes the opposite of that. That is really what I try to do. So that is the story of the fisherman, a brother who will do anything for his brothers, at some point wants to kill them. An Orchestra of Minorities, the same thing. A lowly poultry farmer who would throw his most prized possession to save a woman who was about to commit suicide becomes so depressed, so vindictive. In fact, he's mad at the end of the novel. The same thing with the road to the country. A lowly, humble law student becomes a battle-hardened soldier. So how do we go from one state to the other? So that's the first thing I'm interested in. Then I'm interested in exploring relationships. I'm sure that is what everybody writes about. You know, some of us who write literary fiction, sometimes we forget that relationships are really at the core of fiction. You know, we shit on the cooling hoovers of this world and we laugh at them. Oh, their prose is so bad. But see, they know one or two things about what makes people want to read fiction. And that's because they not only explore relationships, but romantic relationships, the very deep ones. This is why 50 Shades of Grey sells probably the same copies as the Bible. Really, you know. So I'm interested in how people connect, and then how they disconnect, and sometimes potentially reconnect. That's really it. You set up a situation where there's a deep connection. You're a mean person. Writers have to be. You disconnect them, and then you try to reconnect them. That's really what drives my fiction. Perhaps a third thing that drives my fiction could be just an interest in, you know, someone said, it's weird. Sometimes memes show up, you know, all these attributions. Chigozie Obioma said this, and I wonder, like, why did I say that? I can't remember. Are you sure I said anything like that, or remotely like that? But, you know, I guess over time you forget some of the things you say. But I saw a meme a couple months ago, or a year ago or thereabout, and someone said that I had said somewhere that I'm interested in why we are suffering in Nigeria, or why some of us are suffering, and that is one of the things that drives my fiction. And I thought about it. I don't think I would say anything like that, but maybe I did. But I think that, you know, writ large or writ small, maybe in that, or even hidden within that jumbled mass of words, is an interest in sort of the genesis of Nigeria. You know, why is it a country? And if it's a country that, you know, one should speak of in terms of how countries should be, what is its future like? What is its present day like? So the fisherman in many ways is a metaphor for the country. And the road to the country, as you can see, touches on a very seminal moment in its history. So I'm very interested in that country. I don't know that I will be able to write about the US at any point in time, but that's a question for another day. So I would read now so that you get a sense of what my prose looks like, or at least my interest in narrative. Okay. I can't find my chapstick. Okay, so I'm going to, if you don't mind, demonstrate a little bit, just because, you know, I came to writing from drama. So I used to be a playwright and a dramatist. So sorry about that. If I shout too much in your ears, you can just push me aside. All right. So the Road to the Country obviously is a war novel told in a mystical language. And I think what you would hear now is, I suppose, some of that essential voice of the narrator. It has taken some time, but it occurs to Kunle that he's been existing in the significance of his own presence, like a thing without anchor. And now he begins to see things, a refracted light spreading across a distant plain, its reflection brightening the face of this world. On a track that runs as far as the eye can see, beings are floating in different directions, and from somewhere comes the toll of some unearthly bird, so loud and overwhelming, it feels as though he's been plunged into the core of the sound itself. He clamps his hands over his ears and steps away from the place, and when he can no longer hear the bell, he looks about, and the horizon, spread as far as the eye can see, is covered in painterly rows of purplish blue light, as if it were an imagined world, something in a picture book. Again, he wonders, what is this place? He searches for any trace of what this place might be. Where is Agnes? Where is the front? His comrade, the war. He's covered in dirt, leaves, blood, and mud, and there are cement stains beneath the zipper and on the leg of his trousers. His heart leaps. Has his comrades seen them? The stains must have come from one of the daring times these past few days when he made love to Agnes hastily in some patch of the bush in the midst of some shelling. And every time Kunle touched her, he felt his soul descend a secret stair into a bunker, sheltered from all the torments of war. He notices now that his right boot had been torn, and you can see the top of his foot, and the rest of it is robed in dust. His trousers are so dirty and caked with flecks of mud, he wants to take them off and wash them. Now he hears a distant cry and turns about, his eyes scanning the undulating stretch of hills as far as the eye can see. But nothing stirs now, nor makes a sound. And when he moves, his feet produce a sound that echoes and tumbles into some vast, endless void and sets off little muffled detonations of sound all around him. It is clear to him now that this place is not of the world from where he's come. It is not the place he's known all of his life. Here, one's footsteps echoes and occupies space, and what one sees here becomes a thing that is irrevocably seen, and whose form soon changes. Yet he feels whole, alive in some mystic way. He becomes conscious now of some change, a growth of the mind, as of a child coming to the consciousness, to the recognition, of new things. This realization alarms him. He's dead. In the time it takes for this thought to take shape, he finds that the place has changed, and the war that only a moment before was hesitant to come into being has suddenly become fully realized. Figures like him are scattered all over the plain, all gazing at themselves first, then at this place. And among them are two Biafran infantrymen standing on a terraced path beside a large pot containing some colorful plant with a strange stem carved in several places. He motions now at one of them, but before they could move, the bell tolls. The uniform of the two soldiers were worn and torn. One has the tag LVII still on its shoulder patch, below the rising sun badge, and the first two men who do regard him are immersed in their discussion, and their voices penetrate him and lodge in the core of his being. I blame him, or the older man in his late 30s is saying. Me too, I blame him. If he didn't shoot at our men, we would have returned and regained our courage, the younger soldier says, gesturing at himself with a sweep of his hand from his chest down to his waist. Look at me, just look at me. What will anybody say? That my own commander killed me? Child, arrayed. My brother, it is sad. Che. Kunle can see the air visibly flowing from the direction he's just left, carrying with it small, shiny transparencies. It is a sight so brilliant and extraordinary that he feels his heart lodge, and the two men, as if used to this phenomenon, continue their discussions unhindered. Once I saw that he was shooting at our people, the older soldier says. I run back to the front. In fact, I load my Mark IV. I run, and I see just opposite me, near that Onitsha main market, Godo men, they tore well. In fact, one of them, they cocking gun, and before he go shoot me, I hear go. I feel the bullet inside my chest for here. The older soldier has pointed to is a large one, like something shot through with a 7.62 mm cartridge used in a Brent light machine gun. Light stretches rod-like through him to the other side, forming a small circle on the ground. Kunle remembers his own moment of death, how he'd fallen and how slowly edges had grown around the field of his vision, and he felt his body yield into something like his entire being was being dragged into some unfamiliar realm. And the next thing he knew, he was here. For another trench, I see two snake-backed people, one man for chest, another for hand, and before them feet even turn, one of them don't run. Now so rocket clear him. He clear him like saying a toy. You don't mean it. My brother is here, answers the younger soldier. The thing our eye they see for this one, only God could please talk. But now, with great sighs, the men fall silent. The younger soldier, still wearing an electrician's helmet, scarred and pocked with bullet holes, turns and noticing Kunle taps the older soldier. Brother, Kunle says, I greet you. Aware of his limpid anonymity, his voice takes on a newer, more forceful cadence. And there what they both say. I come from the country. I fight with Commando Battalion, you see. 32 Brigade at Abagana. Yeah. You people are the ones there after us, the older soldier says. Yes, says Kunle. Oh, we were there, rear flank. In fact, we saw your men, the white men fighting in the open. We saw you people. Yes. It was me. In fact, I was killed at the rear. Kunle said. Your head, the younger soldier says, nodding. We can see it. Shrapnel, Abi. Kunle nods. The skin feels loose on his head, as if something is glued to it, and towards the side of his head there's an object, sharp edge, the fragment of some hard material lodged in the hole in his head. He tells them how he slept little the previous night and wanted to close his eyes only momentarily, and he'd made for the house at the rear of the front when he ended up here instead. The men shake their heads. It is how we will all die, every single one of us in this war, the younger soldier says, shaking his head. May God save us. Sir, where are you people going? Huh? Now that you are here, Kunle points. The people over there, where is this valley? Where are they going to? Well, hills of the ancestors, the older soldier says, in the way that is characteristic of the living, as if something external and austere has spoken through them. Kunle looks in the direction the soldier has pointed, but he can see nothing, save people crowding various parts of the large, endless fields. The men appear different. Both have acquired the clean translucence of young toads, the insides of their bodies and the faint outline of what lies beyond them visible. And the men turn from him and follow the path with such speed, even though his eyes are trained on them, he cannot see where they go. Okay, I suppose you can see that he's in the plane of the dead. So one of the things that, in fact, I would say drives the structure of my novels is that I often try as much as I can to create, if nothing, at least the illusion of originality, at the very least. We don't want to aim too high and then land on something small. But yes, I try. See, I believe, and I'm sure that I'm biased, but I believe that the novel is the greatest art form. I'm sure the man in yellow is thinking music, you stupid. Well, maybe you can say that. No, you're not. You're a good man. You're not thinking that. Yeah, well, okay. You can say it's music, but I think that the novel is really the greatest art form. Of course, I have my reasons, but one of the reasons is because you can do anything with it. You can tell a story through water bottles, and it can work if you make it. So I always try to find ways to invent something. But I'm not the kind of writer, I hope, whose experimentation or what I call conceptual fiction wears its concepts on its sleeves. Maybe sometimes, but one tries to do it in such a way that it is hidden, through multiple layers. Okay, but this novel is told in such a way that the past is the present, and the present is the future. So we have 1948 is when the actual novel takes place, but the war takes place from 1967 to 1970. So we'll say that 90% of the novel deals with 1967 to 1970, but again, the narrative present is 1948. About one evening in an 8-hour period, a seer receives a vision of Nigeria descending into hell. So what essentially happens is that there is a sort of a displacement of time, you see. So that way, by the time the vision ends, in the section I'm going to read now, Nigeria is not even an independent country. The Union Jack is still flying everywhere. So that the seer who has just witnessed the Civil War begins to wonder if what he has seen is actually real. Okay? So he climbs down the hill in a rush, leaving the ball behind, the amulet in his pocket. The sky is lighting up in the slow retreat of the night. There are early signs of life, of the fact that this is now 19 March 1947, a new day. One so removed from the future he's dwelt in all night that walking in this time feels unreal. Now he has arrived at the primary school at the edge of town. He gazes closely at the Union Jack flying outside the school. Beside it sits the new building of a post office, recently commissioned by the Nigeria's Governor General, Arthur Richard. He walks for a long time along a narrow path, images of Biafra traveling around his mind until he sees that the star has stopped, resting above a house outside Okearo Road. The star leads him into a bushy path filled on both sides with things that people have dumped here: a broken bucket, a damaged cyclo-style machine, a clump of corn husks decaying against a rack of putrefying waste. Over this, a clothesline stretches with a lone wrapper made of rayon on it, waving in the pre-dawn breeze. Against the mud wall, a broken cupboard sits. Something rustles inside it as he approaches, like a stone. A rat drops out of it and flees into the bush. He recognizes his brown stucco house, its glazed windows, its surroundings. There, across the road, is where the accident will happen 20 years from now. That house right there is still unroofed. It's where Nkechi and her family will move 7 years from now. He's transfixed for a moment by the awe-inspiring evidence of the vision, the mystical creation of Ifa's eyes, so that by the time he hears the sudden cry of the baby, he feels a shudder. He touches the door, then steps back, for he knows how it will turn out, yet he wills this part of the vision will not be as he had seen it. Yes, a sleepy voice calls out. He speaks with another, more solemnly, then shouts again. Tanyon kola kunibai. Meaning, he says, breathing heavy. Emi Igbala. Ojishefa. Ah, another voice says. He hears more footsteps approach the door, and again the wail of a little child. The door opens and he sees before him faces he can recognize, but now much younger than they will become. First is the father, clean-shaven, He wears a white singlet and a pair of glasses. Akure, the father greets him. Chigozie, let him enter first before you ask him these questions. The woman, who is older, says from behind in a strange Yoruba dialect. Igbala shakes his head. He knows he will be better served if he enters, yet he's apprehensive. I have a message from Ifa, he says, and I must know if you're willing to receive my message or not before I enter your house. Message for me, the man says, looking back at the older woman. Yes. Igbala tries to steady his voice. It is about your newborn son. Okay. The man glances back at the older woman, then at Igbala. The man blinks, begins to speak, but stops as a woman looking feeble approaches, covered from the bosom to the knee in a piece of wrapper. I can hear your voices. Who is this? The younger woman saying. It is Igbala, the prophet. The father says, his voice drained. The younger woman puts her hand to her mouth, and the man pulls back gently but towards a bench on which a small goat sleeps. Igbala calls. He can feel the strain in the woman's voice as she whispers into the ears of her husband. He waits. The man steps towards the door. Sir, the man says now, we don't want your vision. We're Christians. We don't believe anyone can see the future, and certainly not the future of our son, who was just born 2 hours ago. Wait, what I have seen is grave, and Ifa has shown me. No, sir. Igbala nods. See, your son is a special child. This is why I have seen his star and was led here. There is something that will happen to him, something that is rare, and there will be. He catches himself, and then he steps back. It is grave, but I must share it in full. They fall quiet, and it seems that the family contemplates his words. Then the woman who has given birth, wincing as she holds the door, says, we don't want to hear your vision. Please, 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 take your divinations elsewhere. We don't use idols and pagan gods in this home. Well, with a gentle but concerted push, she closes the door. Now Igbala turns around, facing the horizon towards the east, where there's a yellow streak of dawn light, a shadow of the sun in its early emergence. But the star is gone. It occurs to him that this is the first fulfillment of what is to come, and that it has happened exactly as Ifa has revealed it. He has seen much. He has witnessed the destruction of a people. And how will he keep this in? For how long can he carry this burden alone? He looks up. The horizon has returned to itself. It is adorned now in bright light, as though the long night that came before was itself a dream. The world asleep before is now awake and is teeming with the earthly susurration and voices, and the machinery of life is spinning its wheel. Like a merciless stream, life will flow on, carrying in its yowling joy, carrying in it the yowling joy of birthing, the sorrowful howling of dying. There will be laughter and tears, remembrance and forgetting, pride and shame, silence and noise. And lost in the thrill of it, most people will not look beneath its surface. And even the curious who do look will not see the grave thing that has descended amongst them, biding its time. Every day the fearful stream will continue its interminable flow, bearing within it that terrible secret vision, so that when the day to be feared arrives, it will be as though a thing unwelcomed has entered the midst of an unsuspecting gathering, unseen. And as such, it will be too late to stop it. Thank you.
Do you want to take any questions?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, does anyone have questions?
Yeah, thank you for the reading, Chigozie. So I'm thinking about how you approach time in your writing, but in terms of like structure and probably in terms of how you look at, let's say, on the story level, that is what the events that are happening and how you arrange them in the format in which, should I say, the time of the story or the structure, if that makes sense. But the way in which you approach time in writing, yeah.
Well, I think that if there's a formula or if there's a sort of an equation that could be given to how a story is constructed, you would factor in at least two things. The first thing, I think, in fact, I would say, obviously, the beginning, the provenance of any writing should be character. See, I believe that plot should not exist on its own, in your mind, at least, when you begin writing. For me, plot is essentially a function of character. See, at least my approach is, I think of someone, and by someone I don't mean a human being, but a fictional character, and then I equip them with a certain properties, and plot emerges from them. I think of say, Cormac McCarthy's work, for instance. Let's say No Country for Old Men would be a good example, but just basically any of his writing, you could give us an example. But there's a great guy, very wonderful, kind man, who is the protagonist of No Country for Old Men. He is so benevolent that he goes about, he goes into a store, for instance, and he is like God to everyone there. He takes a coin, he places it on the table, and he says to you, head or tail. If you choose, he would have predetermined what the answer is. If he predetermined that it was head and you chose tail, what it does is it blows your head off the next second. So the guy is a sociopath, psychotic killer. So all you need to do is create a person like that, and then imbue them with those characteristics. And what do they do? I mean, they go and kill people. You see. So so that is characterization. So the second element, I think, is really what we will call, I'm a rebel, so I try to stay away from the language of, the popular language of fiction, not because I want to create my own thing, but I just don't like anything to be so fixed. But we call it setting, so setting is both place and time. See, those two things it's very crucial, because in terms of structure, that's what you use to do anything. I'll give you an example of the road to the not the road to the country, an Orchestra of Minorities. See, there's a way in which, at least in my construction, and so I never read my books after they're published. So honestly, I don't know what is in there sometimes. It is true, I can't stand to read them. But in my memory of how I tried to construct that novel, I wanted to have the narrator who is a spirit. So the Chigozie that you see in my name is a sort of an index of divinity according to the Igbo, ontology. It's believed that everybody has a G in them. So that is a spirit that lives beyond time. So how does it tell a story that is anchored in time? Well, you have to fix a character in a specific space, So time and place go together in that sense. And so what you do is when he goes into the spirit world, the time changes, the tense too changes. So I play a lot with tense, as you can see the scene that I read from this book, where he's dead. So my main character actually dies halfway through the novel. So he has a near-death experience and comes back alive. It's in present, simple present tense, and then most of the rest of the novel deviates from that. So those are the things. I don't know if I'm answering your question intelligently or not. I'm not as smart as you think I am, but it's a great question. So time and place work together in a sort of a chorus way. See, there's a story that I wrote a couple years ago that I'm developing now into a novel. So it takes place in the imagination of the main character. See, so he imagines that he falls in love with this woman who is his teacher. There's a sort of a 10-year-old boy who has just suffered a loss. So it's a very vivid imagination. But the next day, he's living that whole experience. So, but there's no transition. It's almost as if the dream continues, but we know that the dream doesn't continue. So what I try to do in that place, so there are two, this is a situation where the place remains the same, but the time has changed. So what do you do then? I'm not going to give anything away because I want you to pre-order the book when and I know that you won't do that if I give it all away. So, but what I've done in that sense is I've kind of divided the book into two. No dates, no sort of time marker. So the first is told in the voice of his imagination. So it's the first person, the other one is the third person. And so the blending of both of them, I'm still working it out, but so far I think it's working. You know, it comes together I've published a short story of it before on audio, Amazon Audio. But the blending together is really a sort of I think an experiment in how time can diffuse into how time can blend, I would say. That almost it resembles this novel. Let me just put it that way. So there's no narrative present. There's no present. There's past. There's the future. You know. So I do away with. You know, see, when you say that evening, John came here. That's specific narrative present. So you anchor the reader in a specific time. But if you said something like, you know, John came here and went, you know, and sat down. It could be any time, you see. So the specificity is what anchors the reader. So when you take that away, it becomes a sort of a mythic structure, which is what I aim for.
What do you think Western audiences misunderstand about Nigeria, and how do you think that literature can be used, like, to bridge that gap?
Do you misunderstand anything? I may not put you on this spot. It's a very interesting question. Honestly, I don't know, because people differ. I know that in general, Americans are a bit insular. You know, not because I'm trying to be insulting of the country, but this is a world that is close in itself. You know, even soccer, even football. Sorry, is soccer here. I mean, I don't know why, but this is the thing. So you know, a typical American might not even know about Nigeria. Maybe because there's a sort of a proliferation of Nigerians here these days. Maybe that has changed. But I don't think it's a duty of the writer to do any of those things. At least not for me. I worry when people say to me that there is a role that I must play. I get in these fights with certain. In fact, I'm doing a series on Twitter. I kind of have paused because it's going to be a 10-part series. But everybody Chigozie, stop saying this thing, stop saying this thing. And it's I'm not saying anything that is out of the norm. So I'm trying to answer your question from different directions, but let me straitjacket you here. Let me just say that, I have been privileged to have been published in a lot of places. I had an epiphany, in fact, in Barcelona in 2016. I was doing a tour of 3 countries where the book The Fisherman had been my first novel translated, and so there was a 48-hour stop in Barcelona. If you ask me, have I been to Barcelona, I will tell you yes, but I never got out of the hotel. Okay, so we stop here because we were pressed for time. We had a press conference for all the journalists who wanted to interview me, and I'm so tired. And we spent the first 45 minutes, and I realized that not a single person asked me any question about the novel, not one. And I'm like, so I stand up and I said to them, sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but have you read this novel? And I don't think any of them had read it. See, they were asking me about the migration, the Africans coming on board to Italy, to Greece. This is Southern Europe. They wanted to know about Boko Haram. They wanted to know about the poverty in Africa. What is driving, what are the indexes, what is driving these things? And for like 40 minutes, like an idiot, I was answering this question. Then I realized that this is insane. I'm marginally interested in these things. I'm interested in them, of course, because they affect my people, but this is not the point. And then I realized later on, because when I do some things, I think about them again and again and again. Then on the plane back to the US, I began to have a reflection. And then I realized that people read your work from their own lenses. They invent their lenses. The South Europeans want to read you. They want to read Chigozie Obioma as the guy through whom they understand this problem, these people who are showing up on their shores. When you go to Western Europe, Germany, France, these guys who are interested in philosophy, they interview me and all they are asking is, where is Foucault in your work? What are the ideas? Really, philosophy. You go to Nigeria or Africa, how are you representing Africa? Are you writing about poverty? What is it? How is it being depicted? What are the italics? What is your spelling of your language? How are you writing African languages? They want to know about all that. America. Okay, dude, you're a black man. Where is your blackness in this work? How are you talking about your identity? These are the questions. You go to England, Commonwealth relations, and in fact, I think the British are probably the ones who read me the way I would like to be read because of the Booker Prize, so they read more of the aesthetics. So these are different types of readings. They are not necessarily wrong. They are just different approaches that people have. So if somebody reads me to understand Nigeria, okay, that's fine. It's not what I would desire, but
in The Fisherman, was the prophecy leveraging a self-fulfilled prophecy or was it faith? And why, as an author, did you decide to include that debate in your work?
What do you think?
That's why I'm asking you the question.
I don't know. See, it's funny that you asked me that question because I think there's a part of me that doesn't even know what I'm doing when I write. See, in a couple years ago, there's this guy. He's a Danish professor, I think, and for some reason he's writing papers about my work, and he asked me. So he would always. I think he knows my work better than I do. You know? No, seriously, it's a very dedicated. I love him anyway. He interviews me when I read it, and he asked me, Chigozie, why is it that the main thrust of that novel, the fight between the brothers, is not in the book? And I said, Johan, you must be crazy. Of course it is in the book. He said, no. Then he shows me, read. He opens the page, and I read the novel. And the fight scene where Cain accused Boja is not in the novel. And I began to think, this was like 5 years after the book was written. I'm like, what the heck? It's not there. I couldn't believe it. So I, it was like years later, I asked my wife, I'm like, what, like that scene is not there. And she said, of course it's not. So as luck would have it, we were moving, and I was unpacking, because I write by hand, the books, early versions, early drafts of the book. And then I saw, I think it was just by serendipity, I opened to the page, and there's the page where I had written the fight scene. I had crossed it out completely, and I had written something on the margin. Showed the effect rather than the act itself. Apparently this was something I read somewhere. And for some reason, I can't remember what I was thinking, I made the decision to cut that, but it works, you see. So this is to say that there's an element of mystery that one cannot define. So, as to the question of whether it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, it's a dilemma that I want the reader to grapple with. My interpretation would be that we bring these things to pass, But I do believe something. I do believe that words have power. It's sort of a spiritual power. I know a lady, true story. She lives in New York. Years ago, she woke up one day and she decided, you know what, I'm going to have breast cancer. And she didn't know why she thought that. Why did she think that thought just came into her mind? But this is what she thought in the moment. And she began to say it. Oh, you know what? She called her mom. Yeah, Mom, I think I'm going to have breast cancer. I don't know why I thought that. And really, she goes, 3 months later, she goes to the hospital. Checks. The doctor is like, well, I can't see anything. Do you have breast cancer in your family? She says, no. They're like, okay, the doctor says so to her. Okay, then get over yourself. There's nothing here. She doesn't. The fear comes back. 6 months again, she goes back, the same thing. And they tell her this time, if you keep thinking about it, it will manifest. Well, a year later, she has it. So she thinks it, she says it, it becomes. It's true. So I think that was what I was trying to do in that novel. If it's an idea, if it's a thought that comes into you, you have to guard your heart. And sometimes it's a large sum.
Yeah, sure. My name is Suraj. I'm from India, PhD student in Romance languages.
To what?
I'm a PhD student in Romance languages. A question comes to my mind. You're taking a course on forthcoming literature. And the quote, the famous essay of Frederick Jameson comes to mind. He says that all third world literature is allegory of the nation, or it should be read as allegory of the nation. As a writer, do you see any, anything larger than just that straight-jacketed or narrowed down or reductionist view of allegory? Is there anything, how would you respond to that kind of, let's say, a label?
Well, I think the guy says something that he probably believes in, but I don't agree with that. I don't think that is exactly true. And I have, when I first started, I used to read reviews. I published my novel at 57, I was very young. I was always going insane. What are they saying? What are they saying? I don't care anymore. But at the time, I was aware that there were a lot of people who thought the fisherman was an allegory for Nigeria. However, the problem with allegories is that everything becomes a symbol. You know, even the characters become symbolic, and I don't think that's a good reading of anything, except the writer expressly says that, you know, it becomes a parable of a sort. However, you know, my intention at least was to draw a sort of a metaphor for Nigeria rather than an allegory. So the, you know, the madman at the heart of the novel is, yes, okay, well, he's an actual crazy person. You know, he goes about naked, wreaking havoc. But he's also a concept, in my mind at least. See, in Yoruba land where I grew up, anybody who disrupts the unity of an entity is deemed a madman. You know, if somebody runs in here screaming, the instinctive response is to deem the person were, is what we will shout, mad person, you know, because that is what insanity in their concept, in their imagination, is anything that disrupts the unity of an entity. So that's what Abulu really is for me. You know, he comes in, these boys are living their lives. They are aspirational, smart boys, living, middle class young boys. And then this guy comes in and says to them, you know what, this is how your life will be now. And he disrupts the equation of things. In some ways, you can equate that or approximate that to the sort of intrusion. You know, I wouldn't idealize the African, West African ethnic nations, you know, that were in existence before the British came. But this is essentially what happened. You know, these entities were on their own. And then, you know, they say to them, become a nation. And you throw them into sort of a disaster situation. You know, my dad always would say that his father was a Nigerian all his life, but he never knew that he was. Yes, because in 1914, the idea of Nigeria became a thing. Nobody was consulted. It was the British who came up with the idea and made a country. So this man was living in a village. He never knew he was part of a country until he died. You know, and the irony of all that is the way that nations are made, as you say, post-colonial nations. You know, in Denmark or any of the Scandinavian countries, Sweden, for instance, what you find is that in the creation of states, most likely or most often you have a sort of a national sovereign identity first is established. There is in fact often a language, a history, you know, of some sort, even a sort of ethno-racial composition of a state or something approximate to that. And then they form a nation. But the reverse is the case here. Nigeria was formed, and then we have to develop, we have to become Nigerians. So the question of becoming Nigerian is what leads to the Biafran War, for instance. I don't even think that we have become Nigerian. What is a Nigerian? I don't know what it is. You know, years ago I said, you know, the ambassador of Nigeria came to one of the events I had in London. I don't know why he came, but he just showed up. And he said to me, you know, I like your book, your work, but you know, you keep saying that Nigeria is a failed state, and you say at the same time that you love Nigeria. You can't do both. And I said, sir, but you can. I mean, I do. So will you argue with my reality? And you know, what I found fascinating, we became friends later on, what I found fascinating about his take was that he strongly believed in the identity of Nigeria. And I asked him, sir, you represent this country, can you tell me what it means to be a Nigerian? And he couldn't. He doesn't know. Okay, you guys are not bored of my voice. I'm shocked. Wow, my goodness. Thank you very much.